Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Cup Duet Reviews. My name is Jillian Robinson. I am the Associate Artistic Producer here at Cup of Hemlock Theatre. And today I am joined by one of our wonderful co-artistic producers, Ryan Borochovitz. Ryan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right, Jill. How are you?
I'm doing all right as well. Thank you for asking. Today, Ryan and I have the wonderful privilege of talking about a new play called Girls Unwanted, written and directed by George F. Walker, that is happening right now at the King Black Box Theatre until September 29, 2024. And yeah, there's a lot to unpack. There's a lot to chat about. Before we get into it, though, let's do our standard icebreaker. What's in your cup, Ryan? I feel like it's been a while since we've recorded one of these. So
Agreed. We've had
going through my intro checklist here.
It's okay. Yeah, we've had a bit of a summer. Now things are starting to come back in the theater season where more shows to review. So buckle up for that. As for what's in my cup, I have my The Cup. Hey, that's the show we're on right now. And I'm drinking coffee, which comes up a few times in this show. So it is on theme and keeping me caffeinated.
Indeed.
How about you, Jill? What's in your cup?
I am also drinking coffee, vinazol. Wow. Vanilla, not hazelnut, but maybe it would have been lovely to be vanilla and hazelnut mixed.
Vanessa.
Just a vanilla brew coffee black. I'm drinking it in my King cup. So it's my King of Hearts hard cup. And this mug kind of looks like some of the prop mugs that we witnessed in the show as well. So, and I thought how fitting that it has a king on it, King Black Box. So that's what I'll be sipping on today. And then obviously I have my hydration station, my water to stay hydrated as we mosey on through the episode. Okay, so as per usual, a little synopsis of our piece before Ryan and I dive in and unpack. So Girls Unwanted, there are quite a lot of sort of spoilery moments that happen throughout the play. So in order to not fully give any of those away, I'll just kind of give a loose blueprint of what we saw. So essentially, Girls Unwanted, the setting is a halfway house for young women who have been through traumatic instances or upbringings or have run in with the law or criminal background. And they are, staying in this halfway house, and the goal is to integrate back into society. And primarily we follow Hannah, Kat, and Ash. And then we also have the character of Maddie, who is their kind of overseer. And as the play unfolds, we learn a lot about what all of their individual past traumas were. And we have the character of Max, who comes into the scene quite early on, who we find out is linked to one of our characters and plays sort of a pillar alongside all of these girls' narratives as well. Again, this is a very sort of loose leaf blueprint. As Ryan was mentioning in a previous conversation before this recording, there is a bit of a whodunit element here. So again, we don't want to get into the nooks and crannies of that. But this piece was very raw, very visceral, very true to this real life environment. That very refreshing having this piece on our stages. Again, I don't want to get too far into it beyond spoiler alert, but all of the performances across the board were absolutely stunning. And I felt honored watching the show as an actor. It's very deep and true and raw. Yeah. And again, it was inside the Black Box, the King Black Box Theatre, which is a new space. It's very sort of kitchen sink how it was set up. It's like we are quite literally inside this halfway house. There was like extensions to the space itself to use as other rooms, such as the kitchen or the front door. So it was a very, you were sitting in it. Like we were inside the house with the girls going through it. Any other sort of loose leaf things you want to add, Ryan?
Yeah, no, I think you hit a lot of the nails on the head. If we're not going to spoil just yet, we'll get to that in a moment. But I think this is very much, I would say, a standard example of a George F. Walker style play, appropriately written by him. I think, you hit the nail on the head about this being very much an actor's play. I think my first encounter with Walker's work was in an acting scene study class, and he writes these very juicy kind of dynamics that kind of give actors a lot to bounce off with. And flex their emotional range. So I think, yeah, this is, it's very much that type of piece. If people are familiar with some of his other work, you kind of know vaguely what you're in store for with this, but it does take you on various twists and turns along the way, which we can get into in just a moment.
Yes. So let's jump into it. So we are going to pop our spoiler shield up, which is a toaster. Now we're in the spoilers. So the character of Max cooks breakfast and snacks for the girls throughout the show. And there was a live toaster that existed in sort of the back kitchenette section of the set. So we thought a toaster would be a spoiler shield for today. Okay. So let's get into it. Max is Kat's brother.
Yes, which is literally the first thing we find out in the show. I don't know if that counts as a spoiler, but sure, it's post-spoiler now. Anything goes.
Yeah, so we sort of get this show opens. We sort of are introduced to the characters of Kat and Hannah, and we are understanding that they're roommates together, and they literally had a physical altercation before the show started, so there's also some beef there. And then this young man wanders in, and quickly we find out that it is Kat's estranged brother Max, and we find out that Kat was given up as a youngin, and Max is her biological brother and is sort of has outreached to her. So that sort of plot line is an underbelly that kind of carries throughout the piece. And then I guess another spoiler, Hannah and Max canoodle. They are intimate with each other, so that adds another layer. This whole piece is full of layers on layers.
I just want to kind of add to that, just in case. I know you said all their names correctly, but if anyone who hasn't seen the show is watching post-spoiler and is trying to triangulate who all these people are, Hannah is Kat's roommate, and Kat and Max are brothers, just in case someone who hasn't seen the show is like, oh my god, the brother and sister canoodle. It's like, no, back up. Yes.
Yeah. Kat and Max are siblings, and Hannah is Kat's just roommate at this halfway house, and Hannah and Max get intimate with each other. And then again, to add on to this sort of layered aspect of the piece, the character of Ash is introduced, who is another roommate who we get the background that she has a pattern of running away. And we quickly find out that she has an extremely traumatizing background. She was a sex slave in her past. So, and
big content warning for a lot of
big content warning. Yes. Yeah. And Marlene, an absolutely astonishing performance as Ash, just carrying all of that character work, of that baggage, of that history that we just hear of, was extremely well executed. And again, thank you, Marlene, for doing due diligence to that real life situations that happen to young women.
That's a good segue into the cast, unless you wanted to go somewhere else. But
so definitely want to, like I said, just kind of tag the end of that statement there. Marlene definitely was a standout to me. Again, I think the character of Ash, like I said, has all of these girls have an extremely traumatic past, but with Ash's past of being a sex slave, and just you hear sort of tidbits of like the actual situation she was in, like being held in a basement or being left in a field with a bunch of women, or you sort of get snapshots of her memory. And I think Marlene, the script was there in snapshot-esque, but her acting really layered that subtext of like, we're hearing this experience as just sort of like a memory flash, but we felt it due to her performance. I thought she had astonishing character build and personal, and I would imagine team table work was definitely shown in her performance. Another really fun added element, and I would love to ask her this independently at some point, but early on in the script, Hannah and Kat are talking about how Ash gives away their food to like critters, like skunks and squirrels and what have you. And I thought a lot of the physical gesturing and physicality that Marlene was using for Ash seemed like a squirrel or rat or skunk-esque. So again, this is just kind of like an actor corner moment of like coach's corner, I guess, but actor. Yeah. Where, some of the buildup of character work can be done through animal work, and you sort of like inhabit or you sort of create yourself as this animal and then you pepper that into the actual human you're playing. So I just would be curious if Marlene was like thinking of, you know, foraging animals as part of her Ash character work. But either way, yeah, definitely gets a shout out for me. I also want to shout out Alexandra Floras-Matic. Again, apologies, folks, if I'm mispronouncing any of your names, but this actor played Kat. This was an actor's performance where she was just existing. Like, I love watching actors where you're transcending acting in a sense of like you are just existing in the space. Like, she had a very grounded sort of like, this is my domain, high status physicality. The entire black box was her space. She wasn't, afraid to pitter patter her feet whenever she wanted to, or like move around the set piece. There was just like a comfort and a confidence that Alexandra as the actor portrayed. And then obviously that infused Kat, who is sort of like this strong pillar of all of the girls. I would say she's sort of like the cohesion, but she has all of her, baggage and trauma as well. So again, similar to my shout out to Marlene, I thought Alexandra did a really good job of having all of that sort of like background business in her performance too. So those two I especially want to shout out. But like I said, there wasn't a bad performance in any of our cast. Ryan, who do you want to?
Well, in the spirit of there wasn't a bad performer, I'll shout out the other three. Why not?
Great.
Just so everybody gets a comment. But I agree 100% with everything you said about both of them. So just seconding all of that. I think for me, someone who was very strong was L.A. Sweeney as Maddie, who is the kind of leader, overseer. I don't know exactly what her job title is.
I think they said she was like, they called her like a guardian.
Yeah, guardian. Point. I don't know if she's like technically a social worker or something, but like, yeah, she sort of runs things in there. And, I feel like she's a very fascinating character, and Ellie Sweetie performed her excellently in a way that there was just this kind of exasperation, sort of like a low hum of that underneath everything. But she's also a real strong presence who's able to keep everything running. She knows how to control all of these young women who are very difficult to control. They all respect the hell out of her, and you can really just see why in the way that she commands the space. And she has a bit of a secret that we don't find out until the very end, and that sort of you can look back on some of the ways she behaved and some of the line deliveries earlier and understand how, okay, there's more going on behind the surface here. A lot of this show is very, I would call it exposition heavy in a lot of the writing, especially in the early scenes. But I think part of what I appreciated about the character of Maddie is that while we do learn a lot about her over the course of the show, it happens very gradually to the point that it never feels like a big info dump. And I think a lot of that is sold very well by LA's performance, in that she's able to kind of plant things in that they feel like they're being a lot more subtle and a little less heavy-handed in the let me tell you my thing, or that's kind of like a comment just a bit about the writing and the performance sort of paired with each other. But I think, of all the characters, she's the one that I was constantly like, ooh, I want to know more about you. What's going on? Sure. You seem like you have this interesting inner world. And I thought she just did a good job in that sort of leadership position within the cast, I guess. Mm-hmm. I'll talk about, Hannah is played by Ziggy Schulting. Again, apologies with pronunciations. She was a fascinating character. I almost called her a fun character, but I feel like that's the kind of wrong way of conceptualizing her, because like there's a lot of obviously baggage that they're all carrying here. Even if she's the one who maybe has the less obvious traumatic backstory, and that sort of becomes a plot point that she comes from a very different background as the other ones, it's still, there's like a lot that's not quite right. And she sells this kind of, not manipulative feels like the wrong word. I'm trying to choose the words carefully, because this is the kind of,
Kat, the character of Kat did call her a princess.
Yeah,
I think that's
princess.
A really good way of talking about her.
There is like and it's very performative, but there is like a prissiness to her. She's constantly changing costumes. Shout out to the costume designs too. I don't know if you have the program handy who did the costume.
Madison Can.
Yes.
Or Madison Kane.
Yeah. So the fact that this is a character who clearly has more clothes than the others, who usually stay in like one or two outfits the whole time, that, she strategically decides what she's going to wear. And there was this kind of, a little floofiness, a little snakiness. She's sort of playing, she has like a chess game going on in her head of how she's playing the people around her. She seems to have a very specific agenda for how the murder investigation is going to go on, and who, because they all have plausible motives. So she, I think, is like the one who's clearly thinking not just about, oh no, what's going to happen to us, but how can I save my own skin? And I think that shines through a lot throughout. Yeah, so I thought she did a very good job. And I guess just the last member of the cast being, Lewis Akins, who plays Max, because he's the one male in the cast, and he never steals attention or scenes away from his female cast members. It is a bit of an understated character, which is sort of totally fine. It's not really his story, but he does have like a lot of layers of backstory, and he kind of, I just, as a performer, internalized a lot of this in like, I'm here to help. That was kind of like his entire overarching motivation here. And it doesn't take away from his backstory and his own traumatic circumstances, because we learn all of that along the way, but it never usurps the plot. He is really just there to be a pillar of support along the way. And just gets swept up into this world and is a good scene partner to a lot of them at various points. I do think, I will say, just there is a few lines, and this isn't like a comment on the actor himself. Well, I guess it is a little about the actor, but not about his performance. Is they mention multiple times that he's like a child. They refer to him like as if he's very young. And I do think maybe this is also just because it's in such a small space. He looks a little older than I feel like this character should be, the actor, Lewis. And I wonder if that's something that was supposed to be more prominent, his youthfulness, because to me, I don't know how old he or any of the others are, but they all kind of look like they're the same age. And I wonder if like maybe having more of a youthful energy in that role would have done more. He is kind of like world worn in a way that makes him feel like he's bringing this older weight to it, but then it kind of makes me question why his youth is so often commented on. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, but it was just something that
I think I didn't even really, I think I just chalked it up to like, like if someone is, I don't know, like immature or like not part of the group or whatever, you like, you're a child or you're you're not in on it kind of thing. I don't know. I wasn't too deterred by,
not deterred, just observed. Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of observing, let's talk about the space.
Okay.
So I had been in the King Black Box Theater before. So exactly. So Ryan, you want to share what you had asked me?
Yeah, like the question that I wanted to ask you, because this was my first time in this fairly new venue, is they really have it all cluttered, set up kind of like this halfway house, this apartment space. And me having never been there before and not knowing what it usually looks like, I wanted to ask you how much of this is set design and how much is it that they've just sort of begun doing the play in the space as is. And why don't you share?
It was all set design, baby.
That's great. I love hearing that.
Yeah, because I had been into the space twice before for non-theater related things. So the space was quite neutral. And it's just like they're dark walls. There are some like pre-made murals in the space, which are a lovely sort of garnish to the neutral space. But where you are watching the show, that portion of the black box is just sort of natural dark walls normally. And then there is a back room that the event that I went to was it was sort of like almost like a storage room where we like hung our coats. So for this show, like Ryan was saying, that whole section of the black box was accessorized to make it look exactly like a halfway house. There were posters all over the walls. There were games. There were books stacks. There was a lampshade with a brazier on it. There were several couches, a kitchen, and a kitchenette or a kitchen dining set. And then there was a kitchenette. So what they did with the space is that back storage room, it looked like they sliced it in half. Half of it was an extension of the set, which made it look like a kitchenette that was part of Hannah and Kat and Ash's sort of common living section of the halfway house. And then the other half of that back storage room, there was just a curtain alongside it. So to act as backstage space for the actors, but then also that was sort of the door into the halfway house. So the front door almost. Yeah, so it was completely accessorized to be this, which is, shout out to the whole team for making the space truly come alive and absolutely alter from its normal state. We love a black box because it's so, malleable. And just specifically, I just want to also shout out, I know I mentioned there's posters sort of darned all around on the walls, and really powerful female imagery and messages, like on the door that led to the girls' bedroom hallway, which we never saw their bedrooms. But again, it was just offstage space there was a Janis Joplin poster. At the back corner, there was like a sort of like a religious woman emblem there. There was, Ryan, help me out. You
I
also
think
saw
that
like
there was a poster for a Hole, so another
yes,
female-led band.
yes,
There was Cigarettes After Sex was one of them.
yes,
There was a whole just kind of a melange of various imagery. A lot of them female energy kind of permeating
yes.
throughout. So yes, so well done that design. Something else I also noticed in the set design, and I wish I'd spent more time focusing on this. I kind of noticed it halfway through, but because the plot was going on, I didn't want to take my attention away from the show to focus upward at the ceiling, because they had newspaper articles plastering the ceiling, and from like the Toronto Star and the National Post, and at a glimpse of the headline, and I meant to look at it again before we left after the show ended, and then I forgot to, so darn, because I didn't want to stop watching the show to read the headlines but I think it was things about like missing women and various topical news stories that maybe it's unclear if they just found news headlines, like real life news headlines that relate to the content of the show, or if they custom made ones that are like about the actual characters. I wish I'd spent more time looking at them to kind of corroborate these interpretations.
I did not even notice that.
And
what lovely to plaster that on the ceiling, like almost like a glass ceiling, a caged effect of like these stories, these articles. It's 2024 and it's still happening. Like,
it's like
wow.
weighing down on them.
Yes.
There's only so high they can go, because that's something that, it's preventing any further upward mobility.
Wow. Yeah. That's...
Shout out to the set designer, I keep putting the program away. The set design was by Sophie Ann Rooney. So very good job on all of this.
Sophie Ann Rooney is one of the producers and also like runs the King Black Box Theater Space too.
Nice.
And Raw Acting Studio as well. So shout out to Raw. Yeah. Also, I guess speaking of raw, there was real raw food, not raw, supposedly cooked. It was cooked.
There was scrambled eggs. That's at least a little cooked.
Yeah. So again, I love the extension of the set piece was this kitchen area. And like we said, Max kind of was the girl's butler, as Hannah, the character of Hannah, asks, are you our butler now halfway through the show? And so, the use of real food, the actors interacting with the real, again, we love that, element coming to life. I like when the toast actually popped out of the toaster. Again, I was just like, great, we love a live toaster. Little things like that I just personally quirkily enjoy. Yeah. Again, I kind of wish I looked deeper into the set as well. Like I would love to almost see this show again, just to like take in everything alongside these like super dynamic characters. Like that's the thing. I was so entranced by the story and their interactions, and it is such an intimate space. So again, you kind of want to be in on the action all the time. But I even noticed downstage, there was a little stack of games and books. And one of the games was like Apples to Apples. And there was, I can't remember the title of the book, but the cover page of it has like the little old lady with the ski mask. It was a very popular book a couple years ago. But anyways, just, Apples to Apples, the Eve imagery kind of happening there. And then some female coded books. Again, I would love to just really dramaturgically deep dive into this I Spy page that George and Aurora McLennan, who we haven't shouted out yet, but Aurora, friend of mine, previous director of mine, and also we did an interview of her for the Cup. She assistant directed this alongside George. So I would imagine the two of them and our set designer had a lovely chat to kind of make this world actually pop out and come alive in the black box space. So shout out to the set. Yeah. Any sort of like storyline, sort of plot vibes you want to kind of unpack, Ryan?
I think, this play, as we've said, is a bit of a whodunit. But so now that we're post spoiler, I feel like we should maybe dig more into that, because it's kind of a fascinating thing. We're introduced early on to Max arrives, and you'd think most of the drama will be around him and Kat like reuniting and their fraught family dynamic. But that really takes a backseat to what the play is kind of actually about, which is that Victor, a man who used to run this halfway house, he was
a social worker. The social
worker who runs it. Not a great dude, but he has been murdered in an alley immediately prior to the beginning of the play. And all of our characters, well, except for Max, are basically a suspect. And this, and they all have pretty good motives for possibly wanting him out of the way, because we learn multiple times that he is sexually abusive to the young women who live under his care. So yeah, I think. Do you want?
Yeah.
Is there anything? I feel like this is such a big part of the drama, because all of them have so much trauma that, and especially Ash is very much singled out as the prime suspect. And a lot of the plot really centers around Kat and Maddie wanting to protect Ash, and Hannah thinking that, it's her or it's us, and she's possibly the most dangerous and most likely to have done it. And Ash having just come back from some kind of rehabilitative stint, and has bad headaches and goes in sort of fugue states. She's actually uncertain, maybe I did kill him. And yeah, it's interesting to think of it as a whodunit, because it does keep you sort of guessing what really happened. But then we're post spoiler, we do never really find out what happened, who did it, and it kind of that becomes secondary to just what all of this brings up in them and how it all comes to boil, but also with the ever looming presence of law enforcement trying to pin it on one of them so they can. And Kat in particular is very hostile towards the idea of what the energy that the cops who we never see in the play, we always hear about them off stage, but how their need to demonize one of these poor victimized young ladies.
Yep.
And yeah, how I think there's a very interesting line that Maddie says early on to Ash about taking out your piercings before we go talk to the police, because they will see those and make judgments based on them. And yeah, I think that just like in a nutshell is a lot of what this play is kind of about, and how it really is focusing on the lives of these women and how society views them and keeps them on the fringes of society, so they never will actually be able to reintegrate in society, contrary to what the stated goal of this establishment is.
And it's that vicious cycle, right? Mm-hmm. It's like that, and a lot of the characters, it's integrated in the script. Like the characters actually verbalize, like there's no way that she's going to get out, or there's no way that, or you can even see some of them like deep down unearth that I don't want to leave. So there's this stuck cycle that these women are pinned against the wall with. And it's heart-wrenching to bear witness to each of their individual stories and their upbringings and their wants and desires. But then, in one breath it's that, and in the next you just see that's not how that cookie is going to crumble. And another thing I just want to add to this too, and as we're getting into, again, the layers of the piece, and even just further into the characters here too, I think what's really well done, and I think it's a tango with the script that George F. Walker has presented us with, and also the performances done by these illustrious actors, of every human being is a bit of a monster, or like has
like destructive tendencies.
No, not even that. We all have monsters inside of us. Like even, I'll just use, for example, anecdotally, the character of Max. Like we get to see he's, at first he kind of is like a little deer, like lost, not really knowing what he's doing here, but we kind of get a version of him that's, I'm looking for my strange sister. And he sort of like opens up and is vulnerable about, his family situation and what have you. And then as the play clicks on too, we find like he's also, fallen into substances throughout his life. And there's one scene where him and Kat are smoking weed. And again, I don't say monsters as a negative thing. I just think this play does a really good job of showing us the empathetic, powerful, raw beauty of each character. And then also we get to see their shadows and their dark side and their slip ups and their qualities of what makes them a human being. I just think there was a really good sort of like pendulum in character work with all of them. And the fact that there was like this, at any moment, any one of them could have an outburst, or at any moment, any one of them could embrace the other one. It was kind of enticing to watch all of these characters that have come from so much and do want so much more to see them, for example, now I'll use Kat as an example, be such a strong pillar and almost like a true big sister to Ash, and offer like physical comfort and a grounded, diffusing being for Ash. But then to see her absolutely viscerally fly off at Hannah, and we hear off stage she bashes Hannah's head into the wall. Like there's that swing, again, just using Kat's character as an example, that I think George has written really well into the script. And then to have these actors sort of use that as like a catalyst or like a launching point, and to really play between those two vibes. Like example two, like Ash, this cute little like squirrely, she seems like, kind and demure and, very small little sister. And then when she takes that broken bottle and holds it up to Hannah's throat, and I'm literally sitting in my seat crying because I've seen this tiny chipmunk now turn into this ferocious, like, it's again, these twists and these pivots and this pendulum of character work. I thought, yeah. I'm going on a bit of a tangent here.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I have nothing. I don't think anything specific to add to that. I agree with everything you're saying. It's to go back to something else you sort of brought up about the monster and everyone, including Max, who sort of seems like the least monstrous of the characters, that he kind of just is there to be a beacon of support in some ways. I think it's a smart decision in the writing, because he clearly has had a better life than all of the other characters, but not a great life. And I think that is actually a really good balance. You sort of expect that he enters the scene, he's put together, he's gone to school, and you sort of think that like, oh, he represents the life that Kat could have had if she wasn't put into the foster system at such a young age. And yet every new thing we learn from him is just about how, wow, my life is really messed up too, that their father has been to jail, that his younger sister died of leukemia, that their mother is also sick and not doing well. I think it would have been too easy to make him just like, my life is okay and I can be like an out for you to come integrate back into this family, and you have to choose if that's something you want. But because everything's also messed up on his end, he almost seems to have less friction inside the halfway house, where he sort of unofficially kind of moves in over the course of the play. That's a better environment than the supposedly better alternative that Kat could have had but didn't. So yeah, I think maybe that's part of touching on what you were saying about like the monstrous, not just as a personality trait, but also just as a victim of circumstances. I think is the monsters come from without as much as they do from within.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. That's a great monsters come without just as much as they do within. Yes. Nice. One thing I do want to mention, and again, I feel like this is so hard to do in such small, intimate spaces, but I did find the transitions to be a bit distracting. So as this play is mapped out sort of like via scenes, essentially what the code for a scene change was the lights would dim, piece of music would come on that again would be female infused, or picking up on the vibe of the scene we just had. So of course I was just like, oh yeah, this is definitely the song that we need to hear now, or this song is going to pepper us into the next vibe. But the lights went out, song played, and actors left and then came back in and started the scene again. I don't think it's anything to like poo-poo George or Aurora's directing in those circumstances. I think it's just like the nature of it being a smaller space and an intimate space. It did kind of clock me out for a hot second before we were back into the scene, which again, as I'm kind of saying this all out loud now too, like with this type of piece that is quite heavy and there are moving parts and layers, someone else could very easily say, well, those transitions were lovely because it did give me a time to breathe and it did give me a time to pivot and sort of like piece together the stuff that we just learned from these characters and, catapult us into, we realize another scene is on the go. And so, but to me, it just seemed, I just was taken out a bit by it. And again, I don't really have a remedy.
Yeah, I think to me, I feel like a lot of this is a limitation of the space. Now, granted, it's my first time in this space, but it seems like their tech setup is probably very constrained in what they're able to do. Because even when the things did black out, usually the kitchen light would remain on. So I'm guessing that the SM does not have control over every part of it or can't fade things entirely gracefully. So yeah, it really did feel like we sort of had to grind things to a halt of this is the end of the scene because there's only so much that the tech itself was able to facilitate in a smoother transition.
One thing that I loved that Alexandra did as Kat is she exited and entered as her character a lot, which again, with a blackout, like it's not like a firm sort of formula to do that. But for example, I remember there was the scene where she was eating eggs on toast and then it transitioned to the next scene and she exited with that piece of toast as if she was Kat going to her room, which was where the actor was exiting to get ready for the next scene. But it just was just like, oh yeah, that's exactly something that Kat would do. Was just like, I got to go to my room, but I'm going to bring this toast and egg with me because like, I'm not going to leave it for Ash. You know what I mean? Or something like that. Like,
it's interesting. I can't say I specifically noticed that. Would you say that the others broke character during the transitions?
I don't think necessarily breaking, but I really did notice that happening, like Alexandra doing that for Kat that one time. And then that's where my light bulb moment a little bit is like, okay, maybe if we had more a bit of an emphasis of exit and an emphasis of entry, that maybe would have helped squash the, not I'd say like the jerkiness or the problematic of the intimate space. But again, like I said, I'm saying this all and someone beside me might be like, no, I needed that breather. I needed that sort of like breakout to get back in.
I will say the sound cues helped with a lot of what we're talking about because we only ever got music during scene transitions.
True.
So when you heard the song, even if things weren't like fully dimmed yet, or if they're starting to move and we don't know if it's in character or transitionary, the fact that they had these musics which are usually pop and classic rock songs in female vocal covers. So yeah, like that was just like a good like thematic device that could kind of at least trigger your brain to know that what you're looking at is a scene transition, even if the other signifiers haven't really clicked into place yet.
Right. Yeah. Great. You have any other last thoughts?
I guess the last thing, I don't know, do you want to talk about the ending a bit?
Sure. Yeah, we can talk about it.
So this play, again, the spoiler toaster is on the screen. So if you haven't, I'll say one more time, if you haven't seen the play yet, but think you want to, we're going to talk about the ending. So Ash kills herself at the very end of the show, something she has tried to do a few times before we hear about, but she is successful at it, presumably by cutting herself with the jagged, broken bottle that she keeps in the pocket of her hoodie. We don't see it, but we see the other characters come back bloodied from tending to her in her room. And it's a really poignant moment when we find out that all three of the other girls are, just reacting to it. And we get this very long, slow moment. It's kind of, I guess this sort of breaks the rule that I just talked about of scene transitions being the only time with music, but I sort of consider this a transitional scene where Radiohead's Creep, a female vocal cover of it, plays in the background, and we just get this like long breath of all three of them reacting to it, and it goes on long enough that you can really look at each one of their faces and see how they're reacting and kind of have a moment with each of them. At least I found. I thought Hannah in particular was a very, because she's the character who has been really pushing to, I'm pretty sure Ash killed Victor, or even if she didn't, she's like a loose cannon, and she has been threatened by Ash that you'd think, not that she would be happy by this, because of course not, but just the weight of her reaction is very touching when you've seen very little that wasn't animosity between these two characters. And just like the way Ziggy sort of leaned against the back wall, and like, all three of them had tears in their eyes, very genuine, like, I wish the play had ended there.
I have tears in my eyes right now.
Yeah. My kind of thing, this is a dramaturgical note that I wish the play had ended with that. I think we got too much of a denouement after this that we didn't really need. There are things in the final scene that I do like and I want to keep. I just wish maybe there was a graceful way to integrate them earlier into the play so that we could end on this poignant moment of reacting to the death and send the audience home with that. The thing in particular that I think was really crucial from that final scene is learning a little bit more about Maddie telling her therapist about how she was contemplating, at least, or have some ideation about possibly killing Victor because she knew what he's been up to. And the therapist informed her higher ups, and that's why she's possibly going to lose her job and under investigation. And I think that was a very important revelation that could still be late in the play, but I feel like there might be a way to bring that up earlier before Ash's death, because again, it just felt like we had this moment, and I don't think we had enough of an emotional denouement after this moment. It was more of a, there's still information we need to learn. And I appreciated learning that information, but we weren't getting another high note like the one we just had. Yeah, so that's my kind of one. As beautiful as that moment was, I think the play in its current structuring kind of undercuts that poignancy.
I think I agree with you. I agree with you with that too. Because again, beautiful use of zone of silence, which is like a whole course in theater school, right? Where it's, you learn just, again, this is very like brass tacks acting of the moments come out of the silence. And this absolutely, as the trio was on stage, like woof, especially it's been such a high energy and vocal performance from all of them, and all the characters are quite loud in their own way. To just have them all sit in that very heart-wrenching reflection and really see the life that was Ash in all of them be sucked away, and also having Max, shout out to Lewis in that moment, coming in and with the Timbits again. It's that moment, right, where we kind of needed a bit of a sort of like
levity.
Yeah, exactly. But him just instantly seeing the blood marks,
knowing exactly what happened,
Kat's arms, and knowing exactly what happened. I thought that was very, very well done. And again, I think that final sort of like scene, if I were to take a snapshot or like a tableau, like that's, like you just said, is the sort of bow I would have liked on top of this very real package of a show.
Yeah.
I think on that, should we end our thoughts and the episode there?
Instead of going on just slightly too long and cutting down on some of that poignancy.
So great. So this is Girls Unwanted, written and directed by George F. Walker. It is presented by the King Black Box Theatre, and it is running until September 29th, 2024. So we will pop the link to tickets and all the information down below as per usual. Also, just shout out to the King Black Box Theatre. I know it's a relatively new indie space, and there's been a lot of awesome events that have happened in this space. And like I said, Raw Acting Studio exists there as well. And I'm looking forward to seeing more shows take on the space, which we've mentioned is quite malleable and does the trick. So shout out to the King Black Box Theatre. On that note, Ryan, where can folks find and follow you?
No point in trying to find and follow me personally, because I'm not that interesting. But if you like me and all my theater thoughts, they tend to live here on Cup of Hemlock Theatre, the thing you're watching right now. So we're at COH Theater on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We're Cup of Hemlock Theater on YouTube, where you might be watching this, the Cup of Hemlock Theater podcast, and all the podcast places where you might be listening to this. How about you, Jill? You're more interesting than I am. Where can people find and follow you?
People can find and follow my artist Instagram account, which is Jillian.Robinson96. I post some covers of songs there, some upcoming show vibes when I have them, and some model shots. But upcoming, keep your eyes peeled, because Tommy Rhodes, the show I did in the spring, we are going to be laying down some musical tracks for that in the autumn. And I also will be going to New York to sing some of the songs for a particular program that Mateo Chavez Lewis is auditioning for. But anyways, yes, find and follow me there if you want to keep up with all of my antics. And then Ryan, you already did my job by plugging the cup. So I will now grab my cup and do a final cheers. And as you mentioned earlier, as we, have been talking about, the fall theater season is upon us, folks, and we've got lots more content coming up down the line. It's super exciting that we're kind of kicking into the Toronto theater vibes again after a wonderful summer away. So we're going to stay hydrated. We're going to stay healthy. We're going to stay supporting the arts, and we will see you next time here on The Cup.
Cheers.